They skipped my pitch. Not delayed, not rescheduled, just skipped. I stood there, pitch deck in hand, while the guy after me got a standing ovation. No one looked my way. No one said a word. That was 2 years ago. Today, every one of them is now on payroll. Because I didn't argue, I didn't beg. I built, and I bought their entire firm. It was supposed to be my moment. San Francisco, Elevate Ventures Conference. A room full of investors, founders, media. They called it the biggest startup pitch stage on the West Coast. And I believed them. I was Ava Coleman, 29, first-time founder, former software engineer from Austin, Texas. And I had built something real, a digital triage platform for rural health centers, an AI-based tool that could save lives quietly, efficiently in places the big hospitals had forgotten. I waited in line like everyone else. I rehearsed every word of my pitch. I triple-checked my slides, my tech, my timing. And then they skipped me. Just like that, no announcement, no apology, 1 minute. I was the next name on the schedule. The next minute, they moved on to the guy after me. And oh, he got the works. Laughter, applause, a full spotlight. He pitched some crypto meets fitness nonsense. But they loved it. I just stood there, holding my pitch deck like a child clutching a trophy no one wanted to see. Not even a sideways glance. I waited, hoping someone would notice, that maybe a tech would wave me over, that someone on staff would whisper, "We'll fit you in after lunch." But no, nothing. Not even a whisper. It felt like drowning in slow motion. The kind of invisibility that doesn't just hurt, it brands you. Burns into your skin until you start to believe them. Maybe I wasn't ready. Maybe it wasn't good enough. Maybe I didn't belong there. After a while, I walked out of the building. The air hit different outside. Less fake, less filtered, more honest. And in that silence, I made a promise I didn't even say out loud. They were going to remember me. Not today, not tomorrow, but one day. They'd have to sit through my pitch. And this time, they wouldn't be able to skip it. I flew back to Austin that night. No trophy, no investors, no headlines. But I had something better. Fuel. The kind that comes from humiliation so sharp, it slices through every excuse you've ever told yourself. Back home, I deleted the old pitch. I started again from zero. Not because the idea wasn't good, but because it deserved better than people who wouldn't even listen. It deserved a future. And I was going to build it myself. When I got back to Austin, everything was quiet. Too quiet. My apartment felt like a tomb full of dreams, but buried under self-doubt. I couldn't sleep for days. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that room, that stage, that blank space where my pitch should have lived. It wasn't just about being skipped. It was about what that silence told me, that I didn't matter, that I wasn't worth 5 minutes of their time. But beneath that pain was something darker, something hotter, something sharp, anger. Not loud, not violent, but focused, refined, like steel in a furnace. So, I got to work. Not on the pitch, not on the deck, on the product. The idea had always been solid, but now it needed to be unignorable. I spent weeks in my apartment, surrounded by whiteboards, sketches, broken prototypes, and ramen cups. I rebuilt the entire platform with only 2 tools: desperation and clarity. No frills, no vanity features, just function, just impact. I called it Rural AI Care, because that's who it was for. Not investors, not the media, but people forgotten by the system. People who didn't get skipped because they were never invited in the first place. I taught myself back-end architecture from YouTube. I cold emailed medical workers in rural Montana, asking about their real problems. Some never responded, but a few did. And those few, they became the heartbeat of my build. I launched a beta version in a private Slack group. No PR, no launch party, just a link. And within weeks, feedback poured in. Nurses saying the diagnosis assistant saved them hours. Clinics using it to triage when the one doctor on staff was out sick. People saying they finally felt supported, But you know who didn't say anything, investors? They still didn't care, still didn't look, and I was tired of trying to impress them. So I changed my strategy. No more chasing. If the doors wouldn't open, I'd build my own hallway. I created what I called my silent list. Every time someone rejected me, ignored me, ghosted me, I added their name, not out of bitterness, out of precision, out of memory. I would remember who looked away, not to punish them, but so I'd never look to them again. I started freelancing on the side to fund the app, built websites by night, rural AI by day. Some months, I couldn't pay rent on time. I lived off peanut butter sandwiches and old Wi-Fi routers. But every user I added, every clinic I supported, it mattered. Because I wasn't building for likes. I was building for lives. One night, around 2:30 a.m., I got a message from a nurse in Kansas. We diagnosed sepsis early because of your tool. Patient made it. Just wanted to say thank you. I cried in the dark, not from sadness, but because something I made finally mattered. That message became my wallpaper. It still is. Because it reminded me I didn't need a room full of clapping strangers. I needed one person who lived because I didn't give up. Slowly, the numbers grew. Not viral, not explosive, but steady. Solid. Clinic by clinic. Referral by referral. People started to notice, but not the people I once begged for attention. This time, it was different. This time, they came to me. A rural physician in Idaho asked if I could speak to her regional board. A hospital in New Mexico wanted to integrate rural AI as their triage fallback. And one day out of nowhere, I got a call from a man named Dr. Edward Harmon. I lost my wife 5 years ago, he said. She lived in a county that had one doctor. He was out that week. She didn't make it. I want to fund your mission. He wrote me a check, no pitch, no deck, just belief. Enough to hire a small dev team, enough to stop freelancing, enough to breathe. That first yes, it didn't come with a standing ovation. It came with a grave, with a story, and with a man who understood that some problems aren't sexy. They're just real. And that's when I knew I didn't fail back in San Francisco. They did. They skipped the thing that mattered most, because it didn't glitter, didn't dazzle. It just worked. So I made myself a promise. The next time someone skipped me, it wouldn't be a loss. It would be a warning, because I was building something unstoppable. And when it was ready, I wouldn't ask for a seat. I'd buy the whole damn table. The check Dr. Harmon wrote wasn't just paper, it was validation. It told me someone out there saw the problem clearly and believed in the solution I'd bled for. And with that belief, I moved differently, no longer a solo coder chasing midnight deadlines. I brought in 2 developers women, like me, who had worked in public health tech and knew what it meant to build for people, not profit. We coded, tested, iterated, launched a cleaner UI, translated the app into Spanish. We onboarded more clinics, and our system started catching things the old triage models missed. Every week, I got another story. A misdiagnosed infection caught in time. A patient flagged for emergency transport thanks to our real-time AI alerts. These weren't statistics. They were names, faces, children. Rural AI was no longer a startup. It was a lifeline. I started writing a quiet blog, nothing viral, just honest updates from the field. Sometimes I posted medical case studies. Other times, I wrote about the psychology of being ignored. That blog started to gain traction. A few journalists picked it up. A podcast host reached out. Still, I kept my head down. I wasn't ready to be visible. Not yet. Then, something wild happened. A major hospital system in Arizona reached out. They wanted to run a pilot. And guess who their innovation consultant was? One of the VCs from the Elevate Ventures event. The same woman who turned her back while I stood waiting to pitch. She emailed like we were old friends. We're excited to learn more about your platform. Ava, looks like you've made some real impact. No apology, no acknowledgement. Just a mask of professionalism over a memory she'd erased. but her name was still on my silent list. I didn't reply right away. I waited a week. Then I sent a 3-sentence response. Thanks for your interest. We are fully booked for pilots this quarter. We'll keep you posted. I never kept her posted, because sometimes silence is the most poetic answer. But that moment made something clear. We were no longer the ones chasing credibility. We were the ones setting the bar. I brought in a part-time COO, an old friend from Austin who used to run health systems in Mississippi. Together, we restructured operations, locked in a grant from a health equity foundation, and opened applications for regional expansion. By the end of that year, we were in 11 states. And that's when I started thinking bigger, not just about clinics, but about the pipeline. What if we trained local women in tech to support and expand the platform in their own communities? What if rural AI wasn't just a product, but a movement? I created the Rural Women in Data program, free training, certification, paid internships. It started with 5 women in West Virginia. Now we have over 200 across the country. And you know what? They're better at this than half the developers I used to pitch to. Because when you've been ignored your whole life, you listen differently. You build for real problems. And you don't waste time making things pretty before they work. Looking back, I don't regret that skipped pitch. I treasure it. It stripped me bare. It forced me to decide, was I building this for claps, or was I building this for change? And now, I know. Every slammed door was a redirection. Every ignored message was an invitation to bet on myself instead. They slammed doors. I broke through walls, quietly, powerfully, relentlessly. And the next time they hear about rural AI, it won't be in a pitch room. It'll be in a boardroom. When I walk in as their new CEO, success does not explode. It simmers. It builds quietly in moments that feel insignificant at the time. For me, it started with a nurse named Clara from Kansas. She was the first one to use the beta version of rural AI in a real clinic setting. No PR, no news outlet, just a link I had shared in a private Facebook group for rural health workers. Clara messaged me one morning. She had used the app to flag early signs of sepsis in a patient. The patient made it. That story was my spark. It was not about money or fame. It was proof. Proof that this thing I had built in my tiny apartment between freelance gigs and instant noodles could actually save a life. From that point on, every step felt heavier, more sacred. This was no longer about proving myself to investors who never saw me. It was about proving to that nurse, to that patient, to every forgotten town, that someone was building for them. I started tracking outcomes. We built a simple feedback loop in the app so clinics could report how it helped. Within 6 months, we had 40 testimonials, real ones, typed out late at night by exhausted staff who had no time for fluff. They told me things like the tool saved them hours when their only doctor was out, or they finally had a way to triage faster without guessing. None of them cared about our growth chart. They cared that someone was listening. With those stories in hand, I applied for a grant from the National Health Access Initiative. It was a long shot. I remember refreshing my email 10 times a day. 3 months later, I got the notice. We had been awarded $200,000. I stared at the screen in silence. No screaming, no jumping, just stillness. And then tears. Because for the first time, someone with authority, someone with capital, had said yes. That money changed everything. I moved out of my apartment and into a small office, hired 2 more developers and a community manager. We were still lean, still scrappy, but now we had space, room to breathe. We created a clinic onboarding guide, did Zoom demos for health centers in Kentucky, Alabama, the Dakotas. The network grew. By the end of the year, we had 6,000 active users across 9 states. Then came the call that would shift the game entirely. It was from a man named Marcus Rivera. He ran a mid-sized clinic network in New Mexico and had read about us in a medical equity newsletter. He wanted to pilot our tool across all 12 of their locations. It was our biggest deployment yet. We worked around the clock to make it flawless. Our back end strained under the sudden load. We had bugs, fire alarms, pressure. But somehow, we kept it together. The data came back strong. Patient wait times dropped by 18%. Diagnosis accuracy up by 23%. Referrals processed in half the time. Marcus was impressed. And more than that, he was connected. He introduced me to directors at a rural hospital association. We got invited to speak at a closed session panel. It was the first time I stood in front of an audience that actually leaned in, listened, not out of politeness, but because what I had to say mattered. I told them the truth. That building technology for the coasts was easy. Building it for places where the internet drops out and there is one nurse for 5 counties, that was real work. After the talk, a woman in her 60s came up to me. She introduced herself as director of strategy for a health tech fund in Colorado. She asked for a meeting, and then she invested $500,000. No fancy pitch deck, no gimmicks, just results. I kept every name, every door that had closed, every investor who had skipped me that first year, and I never went back to them. Not out of revenge, but because I had outgrown their vision while they were looking for the next unicorn. I was building a movement. We added a new feature, real-time language translation for frontline workers dealing with non-English speaking patients. The response was overwhelming. Suddenly, we were not just helping rural America. We were helping immigrant communities across it too. We scaled to 15 states, brought on a CTO and a full-time compliance officer, got audited, passed. Every week brought a new challenge. Servers going down during storms, user support overwhelmed, local laws changing overnight. But I learned to lead. Not perfectly, but with consistency, with truth. And through it all, I never forgot Clara, that first yes, the one that did not come with claps or checks, but with trust, with a story, with impact. You can build a business off buzz, but you build a legacy off belief. And now, I was finally ready for what came next. Not because I had something to prove, but because I had something to protect, and no one was ever skipping me again. The next invitation came in an envelope, thick paper, embossed with silver. It looked expensive. It looked important. Inside was a letter from Elevate Ventures, the very same conference that skipped my pitch 2 years ago. They were hosting a new innovation showcase, and they wanted me to be a featured speaker. No apology, no mention of the past, just an assumption that I would say yes. As if the version of me they once ignored had quietly vanished. I stared at the letter for a long time. My fingers traced the raised ink. Then I set it down. Not because I was unsure, but because I needed a moment to enjoy the symmetry. I said yes, not because I owed them anything, but because this time, I would not be pitching. I would be unveiling. The keynote slot was scheduled for the final hour of the final day. Prime time. I walked into that conference hall like it was a crime scene I had come back to cleanse. Same chandeliers, same marble floors, same smug name tags. But I was not the same. My team flew in from 3 cities. Our display booth was simple. Black and white, no neon, just numbers, just truth. In my pocket, I carried a list, handwritten. The names of every investor who skipped me that first year. I was not here for them, but I wanted them to feel the silence, the one they once gave me. Before my talk, I walked through the expo floor. A few people recognized me now. Some nodded. Some smiled too wide. That is the thing about success. It changes how people pretend they treated you. I stepped onto the stage with nothing but a clicker and a single slide. It read, Rural AI Care. 23 states. Over 97,000 patients supported. 0 skipped pitches. And then I spoke. Not loud, but with weight. I told them about the girl in West Virginia who trained as a local tech lead and saved her own grandfather using the platform she helped deploy. I told them about the hospital in Nebraska that cut emergency response times by 32% using our tools. I told them that we did not go viral. We went vital. No one clapped for the first 10 seconds, and that silence was sweeter than any applause. After the session, they swarmed me, VCs asking for meetings, accelerator programs offering slots. I smiled, accepted their cards, and quietly passed most of them to my head of partnerships. She knew which ones to follow up with, and which ones belonged in the archive of never again. That night, I did not attend the after-party. I had another meeting, a private one, with the board of a small but struggling investment firm, the same firm that funded Elevate Ventures, and they were in trouble. I had been watching their quarterly reports, declining returns, mismanaged assets, whispers of restructuring. I met them at a rooftop suite downtown. The air was crisp, the table long. They asked why I was interested. I told them the truth, because I knew what it felt like to be overlooked, and I knew how to find value where others only saw failure. The offer was clean, a full acquisition, under a shell company my legal team had prepped months ago. They agreed. Desperation makes decisions faster. And just like that, the institution that once powered the room that skipped me now wore my name on its ownership documents. I did not announce it publicly. No headlines, no press release, just a quiet shift. One signature, one seat, one empire turned inside out. A week later, I returned to the Elevate Ventures office, this time as their new majority stakeholder. I walked into the boardroom where they held their internal strategy meetings. Half of them looked confused. The other half looked uncomfortable. I let the silence stretch. Then I spoke. I said, "Some of you might remember me. I am the founder you never gave 5 minutes to. Now I own your clock." They did not applaud. They did not argue. They listened, because there was nothing else to do. After that meeting, I walked the halls, past the portraits of past partners, past the doors that once closed in my face, and I smiled, not out of revenge, but out of clarity. You do not have to shout to win. You do not need to burn bridges. You just need to keep building until the structure you create casts a shadow over theirs. That is how you reclaim the room. That is how you rewrite the memory. That is how you own the silence. The real victory is not the applause. It is the aftermath. It is what happens when the lights go off and the cameras stop recording. It is when the same people who once ignored you now call you boss and they do not even know it yet. Weeks after the acquisition, I walked through the lobby of the Elevate Ventures building. No entourage, no announcement, just me and my notebook. The receptionist asked if I had an appointment. I smiled and said I was here for the 10 o'clock board check-in. She looked up my name and stood a little straighter. Of course, right this way. Power does not knock on doors. It walks through them. Inside the boardroom, a few familiar faces sat around a polished table. Some glanced up with polite confusion. One of them recognized me, and his eyes widened like he had seen a ghost from a story he tried to forget. I did not gloat. I did not raise my voice. I simply opened my notebook and spoke about projections, about missed opportunities, about value that was left to rot under their feet while they chased shiny apps and empty buzzwords. None of them interrupted, not because they agreed, but because they had no ground to stand on anymore. This was not a revenge story. This was a redirection, a rerouting of influence, a reminder that the ignored are often the architects of tomorrow. After the meeting, I stepped into what used to be the investor lounge. It still smelled like expensive coffee and denial. I looked at the wall where they displayed photos of past speakers. Men in suits, perfect smiles, empty eyes. And now there would be a new frame, one that told a different story. Outside in the hallway, I passed a woman on her phone. She was young, nervous, holding a pitch deck against her chest like a shield. I stopped and asked what she was building. She blinked, unsure if I was serious. Then she told me. Her voice shook a little, but her idea was solid, scrappy, real. I listened. Not because I wanted to invest, but because no one had done that for me when it mattered most. Before I walked away, I told her one thing. Do not wait for their permission. Build anyway. I think she will remember that, just like I remember every second of being skipped. Months passed. Rural AI grew faster than our forecasts. We launched predictive triage tools powered by machine learning models trained on real rural data. Not city bias, not academic assumptions, just truth. Hospitals that once refused tech pilots now begged to be next. Insurance providers reached out. State boards requested demos. I said yes to the ones who had never laughed at me, and no to the ones who once told me they had no interest in apps without male founders. We started getting acquisition offers, big ones, numbers that could retire a whole generation. But I was not building this to sell. I was building it to stay. Because this was not a chapter. It was a legacy, not a comeback, a correction. I met with grassroots health workers in places most maps barely label. I shook hands with nurses who ran 2-room clinics powered by determination and duct tape. They were the ones holding the line when systems collapsed. I built for them. I still do. At our second-year summit, we hosted users from all 23 states. Some drove 18 hours just to say thank you. We did not give out branded water bottles. We gave them the stage, let them teach each other. We listened, and we learned. That is how you scale justice. Not by chasing exits, but by deepening roots. The media eventually caught on. They ran pieces with headlines like the startup that humbled Silicon Valley or from silence to CEO. But they missed the core. They saw the power play. They did not see the nights I cried alone in a 1-bedroom apartment while code failed and bills piled up. They missed the small moments, the nurse in Kansas, the woman in the hallway, the fire I held in my chest when no one would look at me. Those were the real milestones. The rest is just headlines. Years from now, they will tell this story, probably get parts of it wrong, probably quote someone who was not there. That is fine, because I will still be here, building quietly, creating loudly, and reminding every girl who was ever skipped that the table is not the only place to find power. Sometimes you build the floor beneath it, and when they look down, they will see your name, etched into the foundation, bold, unskippable.